Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Payne, and welcome to the Brand Organics podcast. Happy International Women's Day. I think today it couldn't be more fitting. I have a special guest and a pal, a kindred spirit, a friend, an amazing entrepreneur today joining me, and I think it's kind of perfect timing. Today, I'm joined by Gina Garcia. She's the amazing founder and CEO of Trikaroo. She's an author and filmmaker, and she's a veteran entrepreneur. So before I just babble with praise, I want to formally welcome you, Gina, to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We have so much we could talk about, I think, for hours and hours. But for the purpose of maybe today's episode, I'll do my best to keep it focused on a few questions. The Brand Organics podcast, by design, I always try to put folks like yourself in front of my audience to, at the end of the day, to empower them with information, maybe some inspiration as well. And I think maybe that could be the focus of today. You've accomplished so much in such a short amount of time in your life. You're a young entrepreneur with such an amazing resume. Let's talk first about Trikaroo, because I think people are probably wondering or maybe even Googling it right now. Can you talk us through Trikaroo and its origins? Because you have a really special story about kind of what gave you the idea, and I think it's worth sharing with our audience.
Well, Trikaroo we basically make small footprint electric passenger vehicles. And it all started pretty much, I opened a bike shop right when I got out of the military, and a customer had rolled in with a ornate antique pedicab similar to the ones my mom ran in the Philippines. And she ran pedicabs, jeepneys, pretty much like a taxi service. It looks similar to like a rickshaw. So my mom had told me many stories of her entrepreneurial endeavors it was in the 50s and 60s. So I thought it was a really cool thing to have. So I wound up buying the customers and put it in my bike shop. And from there, people wanted to start renting it for like weddings, private parties, and things like that. And these antique rickshaws are not something that Americans could be riding on without destroying. So from that, I started actually going into manufacturing my own line of pedicabs. And we actually operated them throughout the Southeast. And then from there, people wanted to start buying these things I created. And from that, it started organically going from people just didn't want to pedal. And since people didn't want to pedal, I wanted to figure out how to make things electric. And because the last thing you want to do is take your two kids out, ride 3 miles down the road, and then you can't get home. So from that, I started developing electric, and I wound up moving it over to Southeast Asia. And this was in 2009 for a year. And I went to the Philippines. I went to Vietnam, Laos, China, Thailand, and just kind of explored all these unique different transportation concepts that are not foreign to their cultures, but as foreign to the American culture. So I kind of just developed things like that, and ended up meeting some great manufacturers of our electric parts and things like that, and started global sourcing and bringing them in to bring them stateside. And from that, we started building up our own Trikaroos. And the premise of Trikaroo is all of our products have 3 wheels, trike as in tricycle, and kangaroo, with that being a kangaroo, all of them take 2. And there's actually more to the kangaroo side, and that goes back to my childhood, but really won't get into that. But just as far as the ability that the one thing that my bike shop showed me is that there's a certain happiness that goes along with like riding a bike and riding your big wheel. I was on my big wheel every single day as a child. So basically I made giant big wheels for adults and to bring that happiness. And let's face it, it's better to ride with somebody than ride by yourself. So it brings smiles to people. It's the only passenger vehicle that you could ride on the road at 18 miles an hour, take it on the sidewalk, and then drive it into a building. It'll fit in an elevator, and that's taking 2 people.
That's amazing. It's funny you hit on a few things. I think what's more American than us not wanting to pedal. It's like, but I think you hit on a few things, and people listen to this podcast because for all sorts of reasons. I'd like to think so. One is we've got a lot of entrepreneurs, so folks who might be really interested in your experience in terms of really finding your market. And I love how you put it. So I just want to highlight it's sort of like you spent time. And I think maybe that's one of the biggest lessons I hear certainly from other entrepreneurs. It's like, you just need to get the data. You just need to get the information. And you literally moved to Southeast Asia. And I love how you put it. You were studying kind of a mobility solution that was kind of a no-brainer for them. It was an innate part of their life, but you recognized the novelty and the fact that here in the U.S. it's not only just demand or lack thereof, and not having competitors, but I think it really, I think, speaks to your ability to identify an opportunity, but really tailor it to a Western audience, really, who I think our only exposure to it was probably being on vacation and associating it with a very tiring and expensive leisure activity. So it's really inspiring. And I love the fact that your mom was an entrepreneur too. So you guys kind of share that. How does that feel kind of at your age now as an accomplished woman entrepreneur, knowing that you kind of have a kinship with your mom? I don't know if you realize that.
Well, I think there's a beauty in kind of following in like a family tradition. I come from a long lineage of entrepreneurs. Actually, my family, my great grandfather brought movies to the Philippines in the 1920s. So built the first movie theaters. So there's a thing as far as being able to, and then my mom's sister brought the hamburger to the Philippines with Burger Express. I think she brought heart attacks to the Philippines personally, but she had 500 hamburger restaurants in the Philippines. She's the equivalent of Ray Kroc of McDonald's, but in the Philippines, and she retired 10 years ago. So there's always been this entrepreneurial gene within my family. My brother's an entrepreneur as well. And so it wasn't, and same with my father. The cool part with my mom, and it's interesting because I do a lot of trade shows and events, and there's a natural assumption that the business, when I say it's a family business, that I'm following in my family footsteps, is that it's my father's business and not my mother's. So my mother co-signed my first loan when I got out of the military to open up a bicycle shop. And, the option was money for college or money to open a business. And it wasn't like you have to go to college, even though I went to college. It was, well, if I paid for you to open a business, that will pay for your college. So it was that way of where do you put money that's actually going to benefit you the most. And sometimes I think people forget that, like, if you invest in a person versus investing in like a business for somebody, that you're better off getting your money back or money towards a future endeavor than just throwing it at something where you're just paying for it and there's no money coming back in. So my mom invested in me with co-signing a loan. It was like $45,000 loan to open my first bike shop, and that was in 1998. And now almost what is it, 19 years later, am I doing math right? It's crazy to be like, that little bike shop is now, I'm now a manufacturer. Like I had, it was funny because when I met you last year in LA and I did the abilities trade show, one of the people there were like, "You're the millennials Ford." And that was like that's like my favorite quote. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? It's like, you're creating the transportation for the new millennials. That is more eco-friendly. And even though, people were classified as a mobility aid, I didn't start off with any intentions of making any kind of mobility scooter, but you have to fall into a category. And that's, I think, where people are most comfortable in, is putting us into that category. But we have college students. We have moms that take their kids to school. We have people at tractor pulls and car shows that buy our trucks to get around like the area but at different venues where you're having to walk acres and acres and acres to look at different things, from boats to cars to tractors to these kind of events, flea markets and swap meets. It's an easier way to get around and see more things.
Let's talk a little bit about your audience, because I think that's a perfect segue to that.
Our audience is pretty much everyone. It's one of those things. It's like when we create your business plan and developing our initial business plan, and we entered a whole bunch of those business plan competitions and things like that. Everybody's like, you got to narrow it. You got to narrow it down. You got to narrow it down. You got to know who your audience is. But sometimes, regardless of how planned out you think your audience is, it's not. And literally a customer showed us who our audience was, and we got a call, and they were doing the Turkey Rod Run, which is a car show in Daytona Beach. And they were like, the car shows are banning golf carts. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't understand why this matters to us, but thank you for your purchase. It's like, well, you have to show. You when you get there, you'll understand. And we showed up at this car show. I literally bought a small RV because it was a 4-day event. And I was like, if we're going to be here for 4 days, I want to at least be a little comfortable. And we went with the intentions. We only bought 3 trikes there. We thought we were just going to be handing out flyers. And then we saw these waves of mobility scooters that were like souped up, pulling wagons, people pulling like on their Go-Go Pride mobility scooters. They're pulling their wife on a wagon on the back because they didn't know a Trikaroo existed. And we literally sold 10 trikes in a day and a half. We had to keep on driving back from Daytona to Orlando, which was an hour drive, to go get more product. People were walking up and they were just saying, is this charged? And we're like, yes. And they were like, just giving us cash. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced. And so we actually had to pivot our business as a company for this market. And we've grown 300% since November. As a company, I've developed 3 new trikes specifically for that kind of arena of car shows, tractor pulls, boat shows.
Congratulations!
Thank you. It's been amazing, actually, and we had to do a shift, like an extreme shift, as far as we're at events every weekend, and sometimes you just have to forget about having weekends. Entrepreneurs don't sleep, and you have to follow the money, as far as it's not always about taking the weekends off. And it's been hard for me because usually I do a lot of activities with friends. I take my mom bowling. I have a great relationship with my mom, and usually that was on weekends, and I've had to shift everything so I could be at a car show in Daytona or a tractor pull in Fort Meade, an event, the Auto Fest in Charlotte, or in Moultrie, Georgia. And that's weekend to weekend. We bought a big old toy hauler. We've bought more vehicles, and we're currently buying a fleet of U-Haul trucks that we're having redone so that way I can have teams of people to go to these events to sell trikes for us. So we've had to learn how to pivot, and our audience are, they're people that are mechanics. They're people that like to go out and do activities. They're RVers. They're baby boomers. They're people that don't log in. Like when I ask for their email address, they're having to call somebody to get their kids' email address because they don't have email addresses. When I ask, can I text them a receipt? They're like, I don't know if our phone gets texts. So it's this down home country group of people, and they're amazing, and they get the product instantly, right. which has completely blown my mind, because our first go around with our product were literally moms taking their kids to school, and now it's semi-retired people that are living in their RVs, living the dream. They're in a different city or state every weekend, traveling with their $100,000 cars, their old Model Ts, their old Mustangs, their old Camaros, and they're looking for Corvette parts. And they use the Trikaroo, and they're getting Trikaroos to match their cars. They're like, can you get a custom paint job? And that's awesome. We're building the millennial vehicle for the people that are driving the vehicles of the 1900s, which is crazy.
So Gina and I had so much to talk about, we actually decided to split this podcast into 2 parts. So this was part 1, and stay tuned for part 2, where we dive into some other areas with Gina, specifically how she stays congruent. If you have questions for Gina or want to discover a little bit more about her amazing story, or maybe even want to buy a Trikaroo, visit trikaroo.com. Gina also has an amazing contribution to a book that's coming out. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. I think it's for only 99 cents, so it's a pretty big steal. It's called Breaking Through: How to Reinvent After Failure. So I encourage you to check it out. Thank you so much for listening to the Brand Organics podcast. Again, I am your host, Jessica Payne. If you've got questions for me, or want to hear a topic, or maybe even want to become a guest on the show, visit me at jessicapayne.us or find me on social. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you next time.